preparation that prepares them for AP courses, the same academic preparation that prepares them to either come to a University of South Carolina or to a Midlands Technical College. You know, again, those are the kinds of schools that I think that we want to have. Diversity is going to happen whether we wanted to or not. Again, I cited, you know, what our U.S. Census statistics are saying about our population today.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening. That's not going to happen. That's happening today. And so, in diversity, again, when you spoke about again the multiple facets of diversity, the growing population of Muslim students who are at the University of South Carolina is an example. The growing population of all kinds of diversity, international students. And again, I go back to the fact that we just need to have a baseline understanding that all students, irrespective of income or race, ethnicity, or any other social factors, are provided the same opportunities to succeed.
Yes, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Judy. And just
Yes.
a quick comment. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Just tell me what to do.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. One of the things I have to say in very short order is that diversity is good, but university is better. When we're on our school board discussing items that are challenging towards students, the question we always ask ourselves is, does all mean all? When we say we're going to educate all kids, does all mean all? Right, Vince? And the thing you look at in that discovery is when we allow a kid to matriculate through our public school system for 12 years, is there a bridge built to nowhere for any student? If not, we failed our mission. And so in the diversity of the University of Education, we have to find out if we're making a customizable approach for success for all students. And when we begin to chase that theme or that mission, then we don't have to worry about diversity. We can worry about university and make sure that we're being successful for all students. So just very short and order.
Well, let me put another question to you, because I've heard from a number of parents who have talked about this, and this whole forum is about keeping it real. What about when you were at a high school where you feel as though the leadership of that school doesn't have that mentality, does all mean all? That they are looking out for one segment of the population, and it's not necessarily even race. It's the PTO parents who show up, who are involved, who gonna raise hell if everything ain't right, you know. And the kids who, I'm serious, the kids whose parents, you know, for whatever reason, are not as present, don't get the same opportunity. They don't get the same benefit of the doubt when it comes to discipline. What can parents do in those situations when they feel like that kind of leverage is being exercised at the leadership level of the school?
Well, definitely I would think that parents need to be actively involved, as many people have said tonight, that we need to hold everyone accountable. Because if the old adage is that it takes a village to raise a child, then we can't expect the number of hours that a child stays in school to be the only educational environment he receives or she receives. So therefore, the development happens as soon as the bell rings and they're getting out of school. They're being educated by the streets or either by the community. And so every day I tell people we're either repairing or preparing. Every day. And so what we have to do is make sure that parents are being educated as well. Because you look at the digital learning environment for some parents today, they can't even connect to what the student is bringing home to have work as homework. And so what we have to do is educate the parents, also make sure that we're assessing our educators who come in, because educator quality always impacts the quality of life.
Absolutely.
And in my last comment, Judy, if we make sure that we're assessing our teachers not to make sure they're not having heartburn, but they have a passion to teach these kids, we'll make sure that teacher burnout doesn't happen. Because that's one of the biggest crutches of education. It's not the color of their skin, it's the color of their mind. If their mind is filtered with so much and they're not able to get a clean education because the teachers don't want to help this child because they want to be preferencing this child, then this child's education is doomed or gloomed because we're not doing something on the front end, which is educator quality and the quality of the parents' education.
Well, thank you very much. My question was motivated by kind of that, yes, Commissioner Mackey, and then we'll come to Kevin. Yes.
60 seconds. If I could just challenge people in the room to help somebody else. There's a good, not everyone can make it to an SIC meeting. Not everybody can make it to a PTSO meeting or even to open house. And it's not because you're not being engaged. And we don't have many people. Parents may be working. They may be tired. Their level of engagement may be getting a child to a student council meeting, or getting them to, tutoring or extra help, or, they're not riding the bus, but my child needs extra help and I'm gonna make sure I've got a ride. That may be your level of engagement. So I just wanna challenge the people in this room, help someone. If there's somebody at your school or your community that's struggling through an issue, help them, or help to troubleshoot or share, things that you're sharing, share with someone else, and you just don't know who you may impact along the way. I know at our school we work to get a newsletter, to get an e-blast, a hard copy, and just to make sure the parents knew stuff that they didn't necessarily know before, but make sure that just challenging other people and just help folks where you are. And one thing I wanted to say before, whoever had the AP question, if you're in District 2, see me. If you're in District 1, we'll put Mr. Forward and Mr. Bishop.
Well, and that person who asked that question has a follow-up, because they feel like the question wasn't really answered, and said that de facto segregation has nothing to do with how the lines are drawn. It has everything to do with how individuals are allowed to manipulate the classrooms to force segregation. And this person does want to talk with someone from Richland 1, so I'm going to see if we can connect after the forum, because I want to cover as much ground as we can. Ben, I might need you to fact check me on this statistic. This sounds staggering to me. Perhaps it's true, or one of our experts may know it as well. But this person submitted a question saying 72% of our black children are born out of wedlock. That is.
That's accurate.
Yeah, in Orangeburg,
Wow.
it's actually 75%.
My God. And the question is this: there are no black males in the home. How do we as society compensate for that?
I guess I had that mic for that particular question. But one of the first things I wanted to say was Mr. Bishop was talking about, and answering this question, when you start talking about university instead of diversity. We have the perfect school. I'm not talking about GCP. The state has the perfect school, but we're not allowed to work with each other, whether it be Orangeburg District 5 or Richland District 1. We have the perfect school. We have to use each other and all of the resources we have in education. You have schools that different charters, different Montessori schools, these type schools that are there. So if that child is not a good fit in District 1, what is wrong with looking at a Montessori or a charter maybe as the best place for them to go? And so, and that's just my answer to that. I've always said that. But when we start talking about men being in the home, you know what? We have got to go back and start from the drawing board. We've got to go back and start from the drawing board.
Dr. Gil Wilson-Giortano?
I do want to say something about this, because I did hear some interesting statistics as well on this. Now, the fact that when we talk about the home and who is in the home, right? Women today, there is with a certain demographic and age, women are choosing, young women are choosing to have their child and to raise their child, but that doesn't mean, so yes, they are a single mom, but that doesn't mean that the father of the child is not at the house engaging the child, right? There are those men, and we really have to look at the statistics. African American men and men of color are still engaged in the rearing of their children. So we can't just make this blanket statement, where are they, they're not here, they're not involved. Okay, it looks different. Families look different. Okay, family structure, who is raising that child looks different. There's grandparents that are raising children. So we can't just say, single moms, oh my God, this is terrible, the men are not right.
Well, as usual, there's more to it than just the statistics and the numbers. Another good question from our audience: can you address the prevalence of black bullying against black students who act white by pursuing academic achievement? Who would like to talk about that? We're back at Kevin again.
That's the culture, that's the reality that some of our kids deal with in their environment. They can't be seen as a smart kid when everybody else around them is technically not academically savvy. And so it's one thing I teach the boys at school and even the kids that I mentor is, if you're the smartest one in your group of friends, you need a new group of friends. And so what does that mean? It takes them out of certain environments, certain elements. You shouldn't come to school and be mad at him because he made an A and you can't make higher than a 39. What do we need to do to get you higher than a 39? What you need to do? Partner with him. The guy who made the A, partner with him. He can help you to get over the hump. And that's, what we kind of use, and that's some of the things that I talk to them and teach them about. And that in itself kind of helps break down our diversity barriers. Because now they can use each other.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I'm also cautious because I don't like rhetorical statements.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rhetorical statements are made assuming that they're always true. And they're not always true. There are plenty of rhetorical statements that exist, and no offense, Judy, to you, because you're absolutely wonderful in media, but media in general will have you believing all sorts of things about a whole range of people.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Include this notion that black boys in some ways are against other black boys or black girls who achieve. I don't take that as truth. I know plenty of black children who are very proud of their achievements, who are working very hard and diligently to change their life circumstances. I was president in Chicago at Kennedy King College, which was in the south side of Chicago in Inglewood. When you hear about Spike Lee and his movie Chirac, he's talking about Inglewood. Well, we had an enrollment at Inglewood of 12,000 students, 97% of them who were African American. Are you telling me that 12,000 students were there just because they didn't want to achieve? No, they were there because they wanted to do something different with their lives, to change their family circumstances, to change their community circumstances. So I don't buy into the notion that black people are divisive with one another about issues like achievement.
But
Can you read that question again, because there's something in there that sort of caught my attention.
okay, I'll read it again. Let me find my card. It's here. Can you address the prevalence of black bullying against black students who act white by pursuing academic achievement?
Who act white by achieving academic achievement. That statement, let's really sit with that. So what does that mean? Are we saying that for a child, any child, Latino, Asian, to want to succeed is acting white? Right? And it's just, so we have to always check ourselves and our own bias. And so that's almost saying, if you want to achieve something, then white is right, that's the goal. Not that academic success is the goal.
Hi, Hal.
How are you?
Doing great.
I hope you don't mind, but that was my question. And I've had 5 kids go through Florida, which is, in our Original One school district, considered a school of white privilege. So they come home and tell me things. And that's what the question was, what is the prevalence? Now, Kevin indicated that maybe there's a culture of that. I don't know, because I've not been in the school. But I want to know that because I think that's I don't know why they would say that. I mean, in an education that we're going to change, acting white has nothing to do with academic achievement. So I think the question is, what's the prevalence? Which I think I got the question answered. But I think the other side is, how do we change that attitude? How are we going to change the thinking about it? Somehow it puts you in a group that's doing something that's not positive. So that was the point. I wanted to make sure if it was miscommunicated in question. But I do think that for the real, this is what they're talking about.
Yes.
I mean, my son lies about things, but he usually doesn't lie about everything.
Thank you very much. I wanted to shift our focus based on our start time. I think we have about 10, maybe 15 minutes left, so I want to be respectful of your time. But I want to get you back into this conversation because as we talk about action steps, and Ellen, you talked also about common sense reforms, it comes down to funding. And when we talk about all children having access and making sure that all children have opportunity, it comes down to education funding in this state and what needs to happen to create that equity in opportunity.
That's a softball. We had a $400 million increase in the budget this year. It did increase per pupil allocation from what, 2,100, 2,200?
2200.
You know, that was a small step forward. We haven't fully funded the formula since 2005. Okay?
Right.
These are formulas that were set in the Riley administration when I was deputy lieutenant governor. We've met them one time in 2005. What a shame. And last year we had $400 million. They were going to spend it on roads. Didn't spend a nickel on roads. That's anybody who's driven on an interstate in their life, they can tell you this, the schools and the roads in this state are deplorable. What we do have, I think, are coming very strong set of recommendations with funding attached to it that are going to be innovative. It's coming out of this process that I referred to earlier. It was created by Speaker Lucas. He said when he was elected Speaker, and I read in the newspaper and almost fell on the floor, new Speaker of the House said there will be no more minimally adequate education in South Carolina, and no more corridors of change. He's from Darlington. Now, Darlington was not one of the plaintiff districts in the Abbeville case because of the tax benefit of Sunoco. It's a very wealthy community.
Right.
And so, and they also have stronger, therefore, there's less teacher turnover. The principals are stronger, the school board is strong. It's a great district in that corridor. But he's sympathetic to what he had seen and what they've learned. And I think there's been, over the last 10 years, since the making of that film, there's been a gradual recognition, even by the most conservative members of the legislature, that they've got to deal with this issue and end this gap that is no longer sustainable. It will drive industry out if we do not have an educated workforce throughout the state. We're Abbeville County, my God, is going from 12,000 population to down to 10 in the last 5 years alone. And this largest employer, there's 267 people working in a paper mill, that's the lumber company, excuse me. They have a very, very tough time because they have nothing that works for them. What I think is most important is that the religious community, business community together, and along with the education community, should form the same kind of coalition that we had when we launched the campaign for the rural schools 10 years ago. It stuck together and demanded change. It was felt by the court, it was felt by this legislature. Now it has to be carried through next year because our entire system has now become efficient.
Yes.
52% of the state's population, school population, is in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We've slipped back from where we were when that school funding case was filed in 1993.
And I guess that was a motivation for my question, because there's this got-nine mentality. If your district is doing well, then you really don't care about this whole equity and funding and education.
Oh, yes, that's them down there.
Right.
It's their problem, and let them fix it.
Exactly.
Well, but I think that's over the last 10 years, that has changed. And you are going to see next year, the legislature will be confronted with the most sophisticated long-range plan with funding attached to it that it has seen since the Riley administration. That is coming down the track. And we, as a community, need to put all of our forces together behind that reform plan. I have seen drafts of it now at the subcommittee level, and it is terrific. It answers every question that was raised in the Supreme Court on behalf of the rural schools, but it applies statewide, because really, every one of our school districts is in desperate need of increased funding. Where you put your money is what your policy is.
Exactly.
And if you don't put those dollars up, you can talk yourself blue in the face. You will not have excellence for the 21st century, which is where we ought to be instead of minimally average.
Thank you very much. If you would pass the microphone to Ellen, and Ellen, this kind of segues into a question that you can address with the thoughts you wanted to share as well, but one of our audience members asking what initiatives were implemented in Florida to begin to address the achievement gaps.
Well, I'll talk about funding in just a minute, but
Sure.
one of the key things that I'm actually pleased that we can report progress on in South Carolina is the K-3 reading initiative, Read to Succeed, that we now have here in South Carolina. The Annie E. Casey Foundation has found that third grade reading, your ability to read at the end of third grade, almost lines up directly with whether or not you were going to graduate eventually from high school. And so we have actually done that in the last 2 years here in South Carolina. I think to your point, Bud, I think that there is a growing consensus in this state about what we need to do to move education forward, and that is one very tangible improvement that I'm proud of in our state. As far as the funding discussion goes, I'd like to expand just a little bit on what Bud said. I do think that we have to be careful when we're talking about funding to not simply say that more money is always the answer. The court was actually very nuanced in their decision in saying that we have a very fractured funding formula right now, which means we have a lot of different programs that are siphoning money off of the EFA, which is the Education Finance Act, which is the funding mechanism that actually gets weighted for equity. And so what we need to do and what we advocate for at Palmetto Promise is that we need to take a hard look at, just like they do in the military, like a BRAC commission, right? We need to figure out which programs are not delivering actual outcomes for students, such as the ability to read at the end of third grade. We need to collapse those pots of money into the EFA, and then we need to have a discussion about how are we going to equitably weight the EFA to deliver the kind of results that we want to see in the schools that have been disadvantaged. So I just want to be careful that the answer isn't just more money, it's how we spend the money that is currently in the system. We have to get that right before we think that just putting more money into a broken system is going to fix the underlying inequities that we see.
I want to hear from each of our panel members as we wrap up, and I'm going to kind of combine this into one question from our audience members. And Mr. Ford, I have one question for you. But as we look forward and we look at the takeaways from tonight, and when one person is asking, what are we going to do with everything that we have talked tonight? What are we going to do about coming up with an action plan? But also questions about what kind of changes do we need to make in education in South Carolina? You know, we've talked, Bud talked eloquently earlier about how our school system was founded, but things have changed. You know, is it time for year-round school? Is it time to have PTO meetings other than on a Tuesday or a Thursday night? I mean, is it time to just completely rethink the way that we communicate and engage with parents and students? So panel, think about that just briefly while we go to Mr. Ford for this question. One of our audience members wanting to know, how are things better in District 1 over the years? How have you brought up test scores? And I know that from our many conversations about education, it's more than about test scores in your mind, but they want to hear your insights on that.
Can you tell me the question again?
How are things better in District 1 over the years? How have you brought up test scores? Yeah, use this microphone for us. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Vince Ford, and I'm born and raised right here in Columbia, attended the Richland 1 public schools, and have attended AC Flora as well. So this entire conversation to me is really not about skill. To me, the ultimate answer to many of the challenges that our children face is about will. Are we willing to do what it takes to educate all children? That's really what it boils down to. Love the conversations that I've had tonight, but that's what it's all about. Are we willing? Are we willing to do what's necessary to educate our children? Some would tell you that money isn't the issue. However, we are 10 years behind what the General Assembly has committed to provide for public education, for education in the state. Bud mentioned that the base student cost is $2,200. It should be somewhere around $2,900. Now, the assumption is that when these school districts get those dollars, they're gonna spend it appropriately based on the needs of their school district, because the needs are different. We have children, by the way, who come to school hungry. Someone mentioned that. That has to be dealt with prior to doing anything else. We have children who come to school. I was told this by a teacher some years ago, and I was floored by it. She said, I have children who come to school that don't even know their name. I said, hold up, what do you mean? She said, I'm telling you, they know their nickname. They don't know their name. So the challenges are different. But what we do know is we have a similar goal. And the goal is, it should be about, are we willing to educate all children? Yet test scores continue to increase. In fact, let me share this with you right quick. If you look at this, I love to tell students this because they get a kick out of this. Our children are smarter than their parents and their grandparents. You believe that? That's right. And they even, if you look at IQ tests, you find that